question. How many half-used beauty products are currently living in your bathroom drawer? Too many, right? That's where U Beauty comes in. We test everything from supermarket finds to luxury splurges and tell you what's worth it. U Beauty, saving your skin and your wallet. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Oh, hi again. It's me, Claire Murphy, your host here of Well. We hope you're enjoying all this exploring we've been doing of our mind lately. In our last 4 episodes, we've looked at ADHD, anxiety and depression and burnout, and we've asked and answered some of your most important questions about the way that our minds work. So in this episode, we're going to share a no-filter conversation with our very own boss lady, Mia Freedman, about her being diagnosed with ADHD at 49. And her journey to diagnosis is really interesting because so many times she's been questioned about how someone can be as successful as she has been and still deal with ADHD. I think you'll really enjoy listening to her story.
From Mamamia, this is No Filter. I'm Mia Freedman, and today I'm really nervous. I never expected to be a podcaster. When I started my career in media, and even when I started Mamamia, a pod was something that a P came in. Over the last 7 years since No Filter began, I reckon I've done around 400 episodes. And I've learned so much from the hundreds of people that I've interviewed, from Holocaust survivors to women going to Mars, to celebrities so famous they couldn't walk down the street, and ordinary people who had extraordinary stories. And it's pretty rare that I don't walk away from every interview having had at least one aha moment. It might be a new thought, a new idea, a new understanding of a complex issue, or just a new perspective on someone's personal story. And today, that personal story is mine. And the person on the other side of the mic being interviewed is me. And it all began in this very studio, late one night in November 2020, when I was at the end of an interview with a woman named Caroline Hirons. She's an international skincare expert whose brand exploded during the pandemic, and I'd become quite obsessed with watching her videos on social media. And during one of them, she mentioned that she'd been diagnosed with ADHD. And so at the end of our No Filter interview, I asked her about it. And, well, you can guess where this is going.
But it's interesting to me how there's no stigma for me at all because it's so common. What was interesting was that when I did an Instagram live, I mentioned it and I was going to do something else about skincare, and I ended up doing an hour and a half about my ADHD and the diagnosis. The amount of people who contacted me and said, one, they recognized themselves and they were going to go and see someone about it because they're always being told off for not sitting still, always chatting or easily distracted. And also the amount of parents who said, oh my God, this is my kid.
Caroline was talking about some of her symptoms to me and her personality traits that were ADHD related. And I started to realise in the studio that night that what she was describing was exactly how I behaved and how I felt a lot of the time. And after I finished the interview, I said to my producer and friend Liz, who has known me and worked with me for more than 10 years, I think I need to get tested, don't I? And she agreed because she knows me really well, and she also recognised a lot of the signs and the symptoms that Caroline described because she'd seen them in me. But then life got in the way, and it was still the pandemic, and I got distracted, and maybe I wasn't ready to know. But also, for someone with ADHD, getting diagnosed with ADHD is a really complicated process that is beyond most of us because it involves a lot of steps. And it took me a year to get my shit together and get an official ADHD diagnosis, which I now have. I'm still processing what it all means. And until now, I've just not been ready to talk about it because I've needed time and I've needed privacy to percolate something that feels so many things. It feels confusing and destabilizing and often mortifying and embarrassing. Not because of the stigma so much, but of course there is that, but because of how aware I've become of the ways in which my ADHD manifests in my life and how it affects the lives of those around me. The way I process big things in my life is to write about them. Putting words around my feelings and experiences has always helped me to understand them, but it's taken some time and I just wasn't ready to share until now. And of course, I had to write it down before I could talk about it. So I wrote an essay for Mamamia, which I will link to in the show notes. And I didn't just write it for me, but also because the way I learned that I had it was hearing from other women like Caroline and other women I'd read about on Mamamia who had been diagnosed. And yes, I know there are a lot of women talking about being diagnosed with ADHD right now, and you might even be rolling your eyes or muttering, "What a stupid trend," under your breath. But it's actually a long overdue and welcome correction for many women, including me, and there are reasons why so many of us are being diagnosed now, which we'll get to in this interview. So anyway, today you're going to hear me being interviewed by Claire Murphy. She's the host of our daily news podcast, The Quickie, and she's one of the best interviewers I know, but we don't know each other that well, which is why I wanted her to be the one doing the interview. So I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Where's your mind at today? Like, as we're sitting here, I know that you've mentioned that you were a little bit hesitant about starting this conversation. You're feeling a bit worried about it.
I was.
Does that then sort of feed into the ADHD, do you feel? Are your emotions also making it harder for you with dealing with the ADHD quirks, as you're calling them?
There are times and days when I'm worse than others, like when I can feel my ADHD strongly, and then other times when it recedes a little bit and I'm not as aware of it. Feeling emotional, for me, the teariness that I've been sort of feeling today, thinking about doing this interview and rereading my essay before we sat down together, that's not an ADHD symptom so much for me. So for me, sometimes emotional dysregulation can be, so I can go from 0 to 100 really fast in how big my feelings are. But feeling emotional, that doesn't make my symptoms worse.
I'm really interested, when I was reading your essay, you were talking about words that described childhood you. And I'm really interested to know what your childhood stories are. You know, the ones when you get back together with family, the stories that are told about you and reminiscing about your childhood. Is there themes amongst those stories that your family tells you were like when you were little?
Yeah, there are a couple. One is getting changed. So when I was 3 years old, my mum got a phone call from my preschool teacher saying Mia keeps going into the bathrooms and getting changed through the day. And my mum didn't understand how. And they called and they said, well, we're a bit concerned. It's winter and she'll come out wearing a little sundress. And so my mum talked to me about it and discovered that every day I was packing extra clothes in my kindy bag to go and change through the day. And also I liked to dress, well, kind of like I do now. Like I had very specific ideas about what I wanted to wear. I really enjoyed clothes even as young as 3. And the other word that was used about me a lot as a child was precocious, which I remember feeling ashamed of. I learned very early on that wasn't a good word. And also that I could never do my homework in my bedroom. I'd always I nearly said my laptop, but they didn't exist in the 80s. I would do my homework in all various parts of the house, never in my room. I always liked to be working around other people. So there are just a couple of things that I sort of have realised are probably still true of me now and are quite connected to my ADHD.
So looking back, you feel like the signs have always been there?
Yeah, and one of the ways that you get diagnosed is that you have to be able to not necessarily prove, but you have to be able to show examples of ADHD-like behaviours throughout your life, because it's not something you can develop. It's something that you have to have had your whole life. And that's kind of one of the ways that people or that health experts can tell whether you might just be going through a phase where you're very distracted or when you're very, you've lost focus, or if there are things that have been there all your life and they can sort of draw lines and go, yeah, okay, the signs were there. And for girls, that's really hard because a lot of the things are not things that you would even think about. Obviously I was very chatty, like all my reports said I was talking too much. I always talk too much. And I was always too much. I always remember being too much.
What was your perception of what ADHD was before you got diagnosed? Like, we've all heard the stories about the naughty schoolboy, but what was your idea of what ADHD actually looked like before you understood it a bit better?
It was exactly that. It was a hyperactive little boy who couldn't sit still in class. And one of my sons had a friend who had ADHD, and I knew he did because when he stayed at our house, I'd have to be in charge of his medication, and I knew the behavioural issues that he had had at school and just generally from talking to my son and talking to this little boy's mum. And so that's what I thought ADHD was. That's why it never occurred to me that it was something I could have. Never.
Had anyone dropped it on you though, even as a joke? You know how you might do something and people are like, oh gosh, you've got ADHD. Just in an offhand kind of way. Had anyone even kind of linked it to you even in a joking way over the years?
Only in the way that people use that as part of the vernacular, in the same way that people throw around, oh, that's so OCD, or, I think that as we've understood a little bit more about some of these neurodivergent conditions, we kind of use it as shorthand for being hyperactive or being easily distracted or being really obsessive about, fastidious about how the dishwasher is stacked. And of course, people who really have those conditions, it's very different for them. But I understand that's how that awareness of these things enter the vernacular. So maybe someone might have said ADHD, but I didn't even think it was something adults could have. I thought it was something kids had.
Well, let's talk about how you actually figured out that you do have it, right? So you've got this list of what you're referring to as quirks. Talk me through, looking at it through the lens now of a diagnosis, talk me through the quirks that you can now look back on and go, okay, now I have an explanation to this behaviour that probably not everybody does.
So I've always been very badly organised at life. My life skills have been really poor, things like paying taxes, paying bills, registering my car, getting pulled over by the police who are like, is this your car? And I'm like, yes. But in that moment looking around and going, oh my God, I think it is. Did I get in the wrong car and drive it off? Because that's probably something I would do. And discovering that my car hadn't been registered for 6 months. And then the chain of events, so then I had to get a new license plate and then I had to get it towed to the, all these kinds of things. So I was used to existing in a state of chaos that I never really questioned because I've always existed in it. And it wasn't unmanageable because I met my husband when I was quite young and he took up a lot of the slack of that stuff in our life. So I don't know anything about our bank accounts I know where they are and I've got the app on my phone, but, I don't know how much money we have or when our tax is due or anything, about mortgages, or I only just recently learned at the age of 50 what night the bins go out. And so I was always aware and I felt ashamed of that as a feminist because,
You don't need to rely on that big bad man to do all the work for you, right?
I'm meant to be capable and embarrassingly, humiliatingly relying on my children. Because I had my first child when I was quite young, and whether he knew that he had to do this as a survival instinct or he was just born that way, but he's always been very adult and he's been it's kind of like that Adina-Safi relationship on Absolutely Fabulous. He's always been the sort of designated driver, not actually driving the car, although now yes, but he's always been the responsible one and I've not, and I have a huge amount of guilt about that as well. So there were always these things, but I always thought that they were just personal qualities of mine that I was ashamed of. And I also just didn't understand how other people did things. Like I can't understand time. I've never been able to understand time. And yet I'm really good with deadlines. And I understand why that is now, because people with ADHD have what's called time blindness, and we can only understand time when it's right in front of us. And so I always think, for example, it's going to take me 10 minutes to get everywhere, but like everywhere, no matter how far it is, what time of day. And I'm shocked every time that it takes longer than that. And then I, of course, become more and more aware of the disruption that I cause to other people's lives. You know, and you can get away with that for a while, and it can be kind of cute and kind of, you know, oh, Mia, she's always late. But yeah, then in my mid-40s, it just started to become unmanageable.
You've mentioned having kids. You said, you know, your eldest had to grow up and be adult pretty quickly, but there's a stage where they can't be. They're very reliant on you.
Yeah.
And you have to be the one in charge and doing all the things. As someone who's struggling with time and with organisation and all the things, how did motherhood go for you when they were tiny?
Really well. Like I really liked that. And I realise now that's because you need hyperfocus when you have a baby. You only have hyperfocus when you're really interested in something. And I was really interested in my babies. The other thing that was good is that babies are chaos. And people with ADHD, because our ability to uptake dopamine is lower than the average person, we need a lot more stimulation and adrenaline than someone who's neurotypical. And so the chaos of a newborn, I thrived in that. I loved it. I loved the hyperfocus and the intensity of being a new mother. Not that it was every day was glorious. It was, in fact, as they got older that I found it more challenging, because going to the park is really boring. Playing puzzles is really boring. And I said that recently on a podcast when I was interviewing a woman who was talking about staying at home full time. And I couldn't do that because it's not stimulating enough for me. It's not stimulating enough for a lot of people, and they do it anyway. I get that. But for me, it felt being bored or not being stimulated enough feels physically uncomfortable, like physically and mentally incredibly uncomfortable.
You said by the time it's your 40s, these things are starting to become unmanageable. It sounds like it's been fairly unmanageable at times for you. Before that, what was it about hitting your 40s and the things that were happening that maybe made you realise that something else was going on?
It's just like the volume got turned up on all of my quirks, in inverted commas, and they became absolute liabilities. And I was exhausting to myself and exhausting to everyone around me. Like I would be crashing my car, like not seriously, but I would keep having minor car accidents. I couldn't remember things. I couldn't focus. I couldn't manage my life. Like I kept spilling things, like things like I'd have a smoothie every morning. I have done for, 10 years, green smoothie. Like I should know what to do now so that I don't drop that. Like I should put it somewhere so that it doesn't fall, or I should put the lid on it so that it doesn't come off and then stain the carpet. So everything just kept setting off this chain of events, and it was getting to the point where the chain of events was blurring into the next one. So I was in a constant state of literally and figuratively having to clean up after myself because of chaos I was causing in my own life. I was just getting so much in my own way. I just felt that my life was unmanageable, and I felt it just tipped over into it's me, but so much worse.
Causing chaos in your own life is one thing, but obviously you have people in your orbit who are going to get pulled into that. Let's start off with Jason, your husband. How has ADHD played a role in your relationship, and has it, now that you've been diagnosed with it, has it changed?
Yeah, it has. It has. It's played a huge role. I think we've been yin and yang in many ways, and I think a lot of couples are like this, where they might have a little difference, like someone's a bit more messy and someone's a bit more clean, and then the longer you're with someone, you kind of become more and more polarized. Because someone's a bit more clean, that means the other person can sort of be more messy. And then because the other person's more messy, the other person has to become more clean, to the point where you find yourselves quite extreme versions. And as I've sort of become more and more chaotic, Jace has had to become more and more organized and clean up more and more of my messes. And that's taken an enormous toll. And I think the way he used to think of it was that I was just reckless and uncaring, and I didn't give a shit about the fact that there were consequences of my actions and that everybody had to clean up those actions. And I did become aware of it, quite a few years ago. And so I was talking a lot to my therapist at the time about this idea of impact, and it was my word of 2019. On Mamamia Out Loud, we all, on our podcast, we choose a word of the year instead of a resolution, and it's kind of like something that we really want to prioritize in that year. And for me, it was impact, because I wanted to try to make more of a positive impact on the world and on my family, and less of a negative impact on the people who were close to me with my chaos. And as much as I tried, I just couldn't. Like I tried so hard, and to the people around you, it can come across as being selfish or being careless or being thoughtless. And I totally get that. And so once I was diagnosed, it's been a way for my husband and my kids and the people I work with to understand where that comes from a little bit more. And that it's not because I don't give a shit. It's because it sounds so weird. Like my brain just can't do it. Like I can't understand time, and I can't sit in a meeting for a long time sometimes.
What I find really hard to grasp is how someone who's living in a world of chaos like you're talking about can also start a media empire. Like it feels like someone who's unable to keep all the threads together shouldn't be able to achieve what you've achieved, because you've achieved so much in your career. But it feels like it was so untidy in your mind. How did you keep your ducks in a row in order to make it to this point?
And I didn't understand that either, and I do now a little bit more. So entrepreneurs are 3 times as likely to have ADHD, because when you've got ADHD, you don't really have a concept of risk. You can't grasp risk very much. And you need to have a big appetite for risk to start a business. And so that worked in my favour. But it can also be a downside, because I don't understand when I'm going, I don't need to put the lid on my smoothie cup, or, yeah, I'm sure I can just reverse into this car spot. It also can be a really bad thing. And I'll be honest, if I was trying to do this on my own, there's no way. Like when Jace came on board, I started Mamamia. I did it for 18 months by myself, and I'd worked myself into the ground. I'd started to develop an audience, but it wasn't a business. I hadn't made any money from it. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just obsessed with it, and it was working. But that's not enough. So without Jace, and he's always been the CEO, and that was something that I found really hard for my ego in probably the first 6 or 7 years or longer. I wouldn't have achieved any of this. I couldn't have achieved any of this. Like I honestly couldn't have. But the success that I have had has been because I've always worked in a field, which is women's media, that is of deep interest to me. So I've always had a hyper focus on my work. Like I'm hyper-focused on women and content for women. And I always have been ever since I discovered magazines, probably at about age 9. And so maybe if I was working in a different profession, I know I wouldn't have been successful, because I'm not as obsessed with it. I mean, if I'd have been obsessed with it, maybe, but that's been key, those 2 things. It's been Jace, and it's been, the hyper-focus obsession.
I'm going to say something now, and I hope that you will take it.
Bring it on. It's a safe space.
In a good way. I mean, obviously I have to understand that, like, I'm an employee of yours. So, like, my experience here and working for you has been an interesting journey for me. But when I first started, I was told by people that you were known as the glitter bomb fairy in the workplace because you are sparkly and creative, and you have amazing ideas.
And I'm often wearing glitter.
And you're often wearing sequins.
And sequins.
But there would also often be times where you would enter the scene, drop a glitter bomb, and then walk away expecting that people will just do or create the thing that you've thought of in your head.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will do that. Sometimes it'll be done with very little manpower, or sometimes when people try and say that can't be achieved, your response is like, no, it can. And
I don't understand that.
Yeah. So it's like, do you see the impact sometimes that maybe your behaviour has on your colleagues in the office?
So much. And, you know, that's such an area of deep shame for me, because the other thing that I'll do is, and you've experienced this too, again, much to my mortification, if there's an area that I'm suddenly interested in, you won't have seen me for a while, or you won't have had much to do with me, and suddenly I'm so in your face micromanaging everything that you are doing, because that's where my hyperfocus has gone, and I can't switch it. It's really hard for me to switch it off. And I don't understand often why other people don't have that same hyperfocus, because I just assume everybody does. And so that used to manifest itself in having expectations of other people that weren't realistic. Many years ago, in the early days of Mamamia, like expecting everybody to work and be as obsessed as I was. And I've realised that that's not okay, and that's not conducive to a happy workplace or happy people. But also shiny object syndrome for sure, where I'm like, once I've had an idea, I often like to get my hands dirty and actually make it happen, but then I'm gone. So you're right, I'll shine my light on an area of the business or an idea, but then the boring stuff of actually making it happen, no, I'm not interested. And that is something that I've also learned through trial and error, and I'm sure by pissing off a lot of people that have worked with me. And I still do. And I still, you know, I had to apologize to someone yesterday because I was just all up in their grill, not in a, I hope, not in an abusive way, and but just in a hyper focus is the only way. I just, in an intensity. And I think it can be, I mean, you tell me, can be really disconcerting.
It's not delivered in an angry or a mean way. And that's the thing, is you never feel like you've been yelled at or told off.
Oh, no. It's never like you're an idiot, but it's just, we need to do this, we need to do it immediately, because all of that, I don't understand time, and I don't understand how long things take, which is why for myself I will always have too much on my plate, because I don't understand what it means to say, oh, no, I can't do that. Coming up after the break, there's more of me talking about ADHD.
Hello, friends. It's Holly Wainwright jumping into your ears, not literally, that would be weird, to tell you about the next season of Mid and how it's all about you. You see, over the last 5 seasons, we've talked about everything on Mid, from marriage and divorce to hormones and fashion and sex and grief, you know, life, right? And we've had so much feedback from you about your own messy middles that we have decided to make a season all about that, about you and the challenges that you're facing. The next season of Mid is all about dilemmas and wisdom and sharing both those things. And I am phoning in my friends to help. Hopefully, we're going to sort it out. And me and my more qualified mates, we are really going there. Mid, Conversations for Gen X Women Who Are Anything But, is back in your ears with your questions on Tuesday, July 15th.
You know, when you're talking about becoming obsessed with things and always needing stimulation, how has the introduction of social media platforms been in your life? Because even the best of us struggle to stay away from it and just be constantly fed information. How do you do it? Does that work in your favour, having that at your fingertips all the time?
It's very soothing for me.
That's so odd.
Yeah, well, it's not though, because in the same way that ADHD medication is basically speed, which seems odd, right? Because we're racing.
It's the opposite.
But it's the opposite. So because we need so much stimulation, giving us that stimulation is actually really good. It's really soothing, and it makes us feel okay. When we don't feel okay is when you take the stimulation away. So I actually think one of the reasons that I've been able to thrive in the digital media space is for that reason, because it's made for my ADHD brain, and I can't speak for other people that have ADHD. But I also think that that has probably allowed a lot of us to mask, which is what you call when you kind of actively or unconsciously try to hide your symptoms. And social media and digital media has allowed me to do that. So it's like, okay, next. You can never be bored anymore. And my biggest fear and my biggest anxiety is the idea of being bored. And not my most traumatic memories of childhood, but some of my most distressing moments of childhood was boredom. Because my brother was 7 years older, so I was kind of an only child. I spent a lot of time just with my parents. And, you know, they took us on a drive around Australia for like 3 months when I was like, and that was just hell because it was just me in a car for hours and hours. And that was a type of torture to me that is hard to explain because someone might be, oh yeah, everyone gets bored. It's different. It feels different for me.
Is it a busting out of your skin kind of feel? Is it a chaos in your mind? Is it like a wanting to scream kind of feel? Is there any way you can sort of understand, like for those of us who don't have ADHD or don't have anyone in our lives who have it, like what is that feeling inside that is driving you but also like having to be at rest is painful? Like what's happening in there?
So I've been taking medication for a year now and I take it every day. And I recently went on holiday and I took it through my holiday because I just find some people don't take it every day, but for me I just find it's actually uncomfortable when I don't. And I didn't realize that because when I was flying home, I thought, I'm sitting on a plane. Like I want to try to sleep. I don't need to take it. And interestingly, I had no internet. So it was like a double whammy, but I had no medication and I had no internet. And I felt like there were ants in my brain. I couldn't get comfortable in my brain. I couldn't find anything on, you know, there were 100 channels on the in-flight. I couldn't find anything that could hold my attention. Couldn't read anything that would hold my attention. It was just like, imagine sort of sitting on a remote control and it's just going speeding through the channels. And you're trying to watch one, but you can't because it just keeps changing channels. It felt like that. And it was really discomforting and uncomfortable. It was really unpleasant. Yeah.
So you've been dealing with this. That's your before diagnosis. That's your normal, right? So you don't really know what it is, but it's your everyday normal.
Yeah.
What then do you go, okay, my everyday normal isn't supposed to be like this? What steps push you towards diagnosis?
Well, 3 things. Firstly, my life was becoming unmanageable and I didn't know why. I thought it was peri, which it partly was. And I think that a lot of the symptoms of peri are similar to symptoms of ADHD, like forgetfulness, emotional dysregulation, I've forgotten them, all of those kinds of things. And so that's why a lot of women get diagnosed in their 40s because the lack of estrogen like turns up the volume on all your other symptoms. So that can often push you or push other people to go, hey, something's going on. And then I read something on Mamamia and it wasn't that it was even in the back of my mind. I was in a meeting and we were looking at the top 5 stories from that week. And the top story had been a first person story by a woman who said, I got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. And I just read it because it was the top story, not because I thought, oh, maybe that's me. And then I read it and went, oh, maybe, wow, that's all quite familiar. And I learnt about the difference in diagnosis of girls and boys. And this woman had said she'd been diagnosed with anxiety, which is also really common because most people with ADHD have another, what's called a comorbidity, which means another condition. So it might be an eating disorder, it might be anxiety or depression or autism. And so often when you go to be treated or diagnosed, the health professional will treat that symptom. So I had an eating disorder when I was younger and I was diagnosed with anxiety in my late 30s. I already knew that I was dealing with a few issues and I had those and it was like, right. So no one was looking, including me. And then the next thing was I was watching Caroline Hirons, who's a skin expert actually. During the pandemic, I got really into skincare and her, and she was just doing an Insta Live about, there was something I recognized about her manner. She's very, like I can now pick ADHD from a mile away, but she's very scatty is a way, not scatty because she's brilliant, but distractible. Like she'll go this to this to this to this. She'll just jump around. Her thoughts will jump around. And I felt an uncomfortable sense of familiarity about that. And then she happened to be talking about how she'd written this book on skin and she said, one of her kids had been diagnosed with ADHD, and she'd learned that ADHD was as hereditary as height. So a lot of women are getting diagnosed in their 40s and 50s and 30s for this reason, because it's being picked up in kids, and during the diagnosis process of their kids.
You're going to hang on a minute.
Yeah. Women will go, oh, that's not what happened to me, but it happened to her. And so she said she had to sit down and write this book, and she just couldn't. And so it was at the same time as her child was being diagnosed. And so she then got diagnosed and went on medication and was able to write the book. That was the other thing that made me go, okay. And it was lockdown, and I just thought, yeah, I'm going to find out.
So you go through all the process of being diagnosed, because I understand it's not a quick process.
No, and you can't just do a quiz on the internet. You can't just read an article about someone and go, oh, yeah, that sounds a bit like me.
So you go and see professionals.
You have to.
Who put you through all of
GPs can't diagnose it. It has to be a psychologist, or if you've got kids, a paediatrician can, or a psychiatrist,
So you're sitting in the office, you've done all the testing.
Well, Zoom, right. Yeah, it was locked down.
Zooming into his office, and you've done all the testing. How was that news delivered to you, and how did you take it in that moment?
The process of doing the diagnosis, which was I had to do this preliminarily very detailed, long questionnaire. In answering those questions, it became quite clear to me probably what the outcome was going to be. And as I started sort of reading a little bit more about it, and then I met with a psychologist over Zoom, and we talked about the results of my questionnaire, and that included a lot of things about my childhood, and we talked more. And she said, yeah, look, you do. It's one of the more definitive diagnoses I've seen. And she explained to me there's 3 types. There's hyperactive, which can be not just hyperactivity of movement, because you wouldn't say I'm a person that's like always tapping my foot or
You're not a bouncer.
Running around. I'm not a bouncer, but hyperactivity of thought as well. And then there's inattentive, which can be more about vagueness and inability to focus.
These are the kids looking out the window during class kind of style,
Yeah. And then there's combined type, which means you have both, and I'm combined type. And she said I'm pretty much evenly split. So there's ways in the diagnosis process, there's ways that they can see which type you have and what the split is. And for me, she said it's pretty even. So, yeah, that's how I found out. And then what happened after that was, it was just, that was harder than finding out that I had it. It was sort of the next part, which was
there any relief in finding out?
Yeah, there was. There was everything. It was just big feelings, just all of the big feelings just hitting me. So there was relief, there was shame, there was shock, there was anger.
Where does the shame come from?
Oh, I'm a bloody 50-year-old woman. Like, I'm a 50-year-old woman with ADHD. Like, no one sort of dreams of being diagnosed with ADHD or anxiety or depression. It's not like something that you want, But at the same time, yes, relieved that there was a reason. Like, it was so weird.
Do you feel like if you'd been diagnosed younger, you would have felt less shame? Was it the fact that you were at that age and you're not supposed to be getting ADHD when you're 50? Well, I mean, you don't get it, but diagnosed at that time?
Well, I didn't know many people at that time who had it. There is stigma. It's not the worst part about having any kind of condition or mental health condition or neurodivergence, but of course there's stigma. It's like everyone just wants to be not that, no one's like, yay. But it was also a revelation and also weird to just go, all these things that I thought were my personality are actually just the way my brain's wired. So that was weird. And then just the way people reacted, which was just really hard.
Well, talk me through that, because in the essay you write that the reaction was almost dismissive at some stages.
Anyone usually who gets a diagnosis of ADHD, particularly later in life, it will not come as a shock to the people around them who've known them for a long time, who live with them, who work with them, who love them. They're more likely to go, well, duh. Or even if they hadn't actually thought that you had ADHD, they'll just go, oh, well, yeah, of course. And that feels really humiliating because it's like, I thought I was masking really well. And it feels dismissive because it's like I've found out this epic thing about myself. And you're like, well, obviously, like it's no big deal. And it's the biggest deal for reasons that are really hard to explain. And I had one friend who just said, oh, well, that must be good. And at least you've got, you know, we had another friend who'd been diagnosed around the same time. Oh, you've got this one and you've got that one. I just was shocked by that. And then I had people, you know, well-meaning people in my family, my extended family, who tried to convince me that I didn't have it. Oh, well, just everyone's a bit ADHD and it's been the pandemic and you work in digital media and you've got such a busy life and of course you're just a bit overwhelmed. And that felt awful too. And then, you know, people laughing. And I understand why. I do understand why. And again, they didn't mean badly because it's not like it's something that's not treatable and it wasn't life-threatening. So, yeah, it's just hard to explain why. It just felt everything. It just felt everything.
Have you since spoken to people about how that made you feel? Have they understood that?
Yeah, it's taken such a long time to sort through all of the things, which is why I haven't written about it or spoken about it publicly until now, because it's just so raw and I'm still working things out. And like, you know, I was working on that essay for months and months and months, which is really unlike me because of my ADHD. I'm usually like, I'll write it in the morning and it's on the internet by the afternoon. And even that's too slow. But I'm really glad that I took my time because the way I felt about it changed. You know, at first I was like, oh, maybe it's my superpower. And I know that there's, you know, the TikTokers and the people on social who try to, I'm a magical unicorn and it's my superpower. And I understand that because it is associated with really low self-esteem and you got to put a spin on it. A lot of people feel that they've got to put a spin on it. But I also think it's really important for people to understand, well, I can only speak for myself, but there is nothing positive about it for me. Like, there's nothing positive about it. I've been successful despite it. You know, I've lived my life, but it's not made my life better. It's made my life harder. It's made the life of everybody around me that I work with, that I live with, harder. Yeah, it's not a net good. And I think it's important to be able to say that. Like there's this whole culture of you've just got to, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just different. It's like, you know what? It's just I'd like to give this back, you know? Like I'm fine, but it hasn't made my life better.
Parenting podcasts can be a bit earnest. Parenting Out Loud is not that podcast.
This person who I may not agree with politically is trying to talk about integrating children, not just into his professional life, but into public life.
I have referred to myself as one and done. That article did make me rethink the term.
It took about 11 seconds for this to go viral.
Oh God, is this the ejaculate one? That is deranged and I love it.
Parenting changes the way you see everything. Parenting Out Loud takes the big conversations of the moment and puts them through that filter.
Because if parents are thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Parenting Out Loud. Listen weekly wherever you get your podcasts.
So how do you now figure out who you are?
Oh, I don't know.
So you've got medication obviously that's supposed to level you out to a point.
Yeah.
Do you then start to like rediscover yourself and figure out what parts of your personality are actually you?
Yeah, I think. And I think it's also about some of it's understanding why I do things that I could never really understand why I did them. And that helps. And it gives me a lens for just not just me, but other people around me. Like one of the first things I did was I wrote up a little kind of explainer about my ADHD and working with someone who has ADHD to the people I work closely with here at Mamamia. I mean, because we all want to feel understood, right? I've always got an awareness and there's just such a deep shame in knowing that you're just too much, that you're just too intense. Like that's just hard too much for your children, too much for your partner, too much for your workmates, too much for your friends. And knowing like, oh, am I texting too much? Was I just really too full on at that dinner that we had? am I asking inappropriate questions of this person I just met because I'm in hyperfocus and I'm just super interested in something? I always have been second guessing myself without realizing why I did it, and then always beating myself up. Oh, there you go. You did it again. You talk too much again. Interrupting, blurting. And for me also, that was a major thing, just realizing that I should never, ever, ever have been doing live TV.
It has got you in trouble a couple of times.
Yeah, like more than trouble, it's got me cancelled on innumerable occasions, and that's taken the most shocking toll on me and the people around me and on my business at times. And one of the things about ADHD is that you don't have a filter from your brain to your mouth, and you also don't understand the consequences of things necessarily that you're going to say. And I don't say that as an excuse, because we're all responsible, and I never want anyone to think that. But if you know your limitations, and for me, I'm very good at live TV because the adrenaline of it means that I can synthesize my thoughts really fast and deliver a great soundbite. And because I always want to please, I will make good TV because I'll say something snappy or whatever. And before social media came along, that was fine. But with social media now, there's so many people who want to take something you've said out of context, or it might not land, and then it can destroy you because you used the wrong word because you weren't thinking, or you made a thoughtless analogy that was, because you just said it too fast and you didn't have time to think, hang on, how's that going to sound? Because it's just out of your mouth, it's gone. And that's why I should never, ever, ever, ever have done live TV, even though I found it really easy because the adrenaline and the hyperfocus, I was good at it until I wasn't. I can't even remember your question anymore. But I think I was trying to say the helpful part has been learning to modify my behaviour and my life around my strengths and weaknesses.
It sounds like, just listening to you talk then, like from an outsider's point of view, you've got this great life, this great business, this great family, you've got sparkly everything, you've got people all around you, you've got legions of fans who would hang on every word you say. But from just listening to you talk, you sound really lonely.
Yeah, I do, don't I? It has been a really difficult year. It can feel really lonely being full on. Like, I don't even know how else to say it. It's kind of like sometimes you're aware that people are just sort of backing away from you. And I've got a very close friend, Sally Hepworth, who was diagnosed around the same time as me. And she's been a godsend because, like, we met each other for coffee when I was in Melbourne. She was talking and she goes, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much because my meds have just kicked in. Am I talking too much? And I went, no, I thought I was talking too much. Am I talking too much? And
that sounds like a comedy skit.
It is. And we can compare notes. And, as we've been trying to get our medication right and all of that kind of thing, it's been amazing. But it's lonely because you feel like such a doofus for not being able to do something as simple as make a cup of tea or order groceries or remember to pick your kids up from school. I mean, the shame of that, and trying to make a joke about it in our family. But, my kids, times when they were safe, but, what mum doesn't remember to pick their kid up from school? So, yeah, an awareness that it really affects your sense of self, because I can do really hard things. I just can't do really easy things.
As you have gone from misunderstanding to understanding ADHD and now kind of coming to terms with who Mia Freedman is, where do you see your relationship with yourself going now? Because it sounds like
I'm so sick of myself, Claire. I'm so sick of myself.
I know in your essay you're saying like every second person seems to be diagnosed with ADHD these times, and you feel like you're a bit of a fraud because you've come out and been like, oh, yeah, me too, in this moment where everyone else is doing the same thing, right?
I'm like, I should have said it earlier.
Yeah. But then how do you now move forward with who Mia Freedman is now? Will her behaviour change? Will people around her notice that she is different now because she is medicated or she's understanding or she's getting therapy? Is this a different person now, or is this just the same person, modified to level out?
I've been a different person for a year because I started medication quite soon after I found out. So the first 50 years of my life, I had ADHD and was unmedicated. Then I was medicated and also knew that I had it. So I would say that I'm happier in my career, in my work and in many aspects of my life than I have been in such a long time. And medication and self-understanding and forgiveness has really contributed to that, I think, for me. I'm sure that a lot of people will now look at like what you did when you just went, oh, now I get the glitter bomb thing and I get that. That makes sense. Not to say it's not really still hard and really annoying, but I think you see it through a different framework. Like I've got people in my life who are on the autism spectrum and were diagnosed quite late and not realizing. And now I know I'm just not like, oh, they're not just rude. It's that. It's like it's just the way their brain's wired. They don't mean to be rude. They're just different, you know, or thoughtless or whatever it is. And I hope that people will see that in me. What I don't want to do is to use it as a form of identity. I don't want to make that my brand in the same way that I didn't want to make anxiety my brand because I'm just not interested in that. It's a little bit like when you're first in love and you just want to use someone's name all the time because you want to talk about them. And so for the last year, I've just been like, oh, that's my ADHD and that's my ADHD. And oh, I'm being so ADHD today. And sometimes I've found that I'll call it out, like just before we sat down and I'm moving all the furniture, you know, because everyone here knows now. I was like, guys, this is what ADHD looks like. And it's like I want to say it because I know they're thinking it. But I don't want to be doing that all the time because I don't want it to be my identity. And also I've got to be responsible. It can't just be the joker card of, like, I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about anyone else. Oh, you know, sorry I interrupted you or was thoughtless or forgot to pick you up. It's just my ADHD. It's like it's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. That's how I look at it. But it's funny, like my kids, as soon as I started taking medication, they noticed a difference. And then when I was experimenting with the right dosage and how often I would take it, and I would often not take it on weekends for a while, I thought I won't take it on weekends. And they would, within 3 seconds in the morning or at any time they had a conversation with me, they would be able to know whether I was on my meds or not. They're like, oh, is it a meds-free day today?
Why do you feel like you need to take days off?
Why did I? Because I thought some people just use it because it's not like an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication where it's cumulative. It acts instantly. And so some people take it just when they've got to work and they don't take it on holidays or they don't take it on weekends or they take it maybe when they've, you know, got a reason that they've got to concentrate. And I thought maybe that's what I would do. But I found that two things. I found firstly it was not really fair on my family because they were getting the non-medicated me, which was very, very symptomatic. And also I found the difference just too much. It's a little bit like when you start wearing glasses and you've needed them for a while but you didn't realise, and then you put glasses on and you go, oh, wow. And even though you were fine before, after you've had the glasses on, when you take them off, it's like, oh shit, things are really blurry, but that's just what you thought was your baseline before. And I think that's what's happened. So that time on the plane when you said that's what it was like for you all the time, I think it was, but I think I just had all of these crutches and ways of dealing with it that masked it and allowed me to mask it for a really long time.
Well, I'm glad you have found your diagnosis and found, even though you would like to give it back, I feel like now knowing that you can take medication in order to deal with symptoms and feel like you can, you know, get on with less chaos. I'm glad you found that. Even if it is at 50, like, even if it does come with some shame and some guilt.
Going on Ritalin I'm not on Ritalin anymore, I'm on something different, but going on Ritalin at age 50, that was not on my bingo card for 2021.
Well, I have to ask finally, because I've been doing your job for the last however long we've been speaking for, but
you're really good at it.
Is there a question that you would have asked yourself that I have not asked you?
Maybe why now? Why talk about it now? And that's a great question, Claire. What I would say is I once read, out there is someone with a wound in the shape of your words. And that's why I started Mamamia, because when I lost a baby halfway through my pregnancy, almost 25 years ago now, there was no internet and there was no way to find women who'd been through what I was going through. And I didn't know anyone because no one talked about it back then, and there weren't books about it. There was the occasional magazine article about it, but not on demand. And all I wanted was to see my experience reflected back so that I felt normal. And I didn't write about my miscarriage at the time. It took me, about 10 years to write about it. And when I had an anxiety attack and was diagnosed, I didn't write about that for a few years because I always lack time to process these things so that I feel that I've got something of worth to offer. And I know, as someone with ADHD, I know the seduction of, I just want to get it out and share it. And I think we're in a culture now, an internet culture, that really rewards that, because like social media and everywhere is full of people just vomiting out their real-time experience of heartache and pain. And if that works for them, that's fine. But I don't feel that it's helpful for me to vomit things out when they're raw, because then you have to deal with everybody else's feelings about them before you even understand your own. And I also don't think it's helpful for other people, because I think that rawness of other people's feelings can be really unhelpful and upsetting. And so that's why I've waited. I wanted to wait a year until I figured some things out, until I felt that I had something to say. But ultimately the reason I'm doing it now, and the reason that I think anyone does, is to feel seen, heard and understood myself, but more to make other women feel seen, heard and understood, which is what we do here at Mamamia, and why I wanted to start a women's media company, because I don't know, I think there's such value in that. And if it wasn't for the woman who shared her story on Mamamia, I might not have ever known.
Well, people are going to know now. And there's going to be people listening to this who take it on board and who might wander off to a specialist and say, hey, can I fix my chaos today?
Yeah. And thank you for staying after I glitter bombed you. I thought I would cry during that interview. I actually had been crying about my ADHD that very morning, and I kind of expected to be more emotional. But I think that I was in hyperfocus while I was talking to Claire. And also I was really nervous because I prefer to be the one asking the questions rather than answering them, as you will know if you've listened to No Filter before. Now, for Mamamia subscribers, I want to play that conversation that I had with Caroline about her path to an ADHD diagnosis, because it was really different from mine, but it was a really common one, and it's a way that a lot of women are being diagnosed. And if you listen, you'll also hear the exact moment when I had that, oh my God, this is me. Because so many of her symptoms sounded so familiar to me, and maybe they also will to you. So you can listen to that right now. Just follow the links in our show notes. You can also find links to my essay, and we've created a newsletter to share information and resources for anyone who's interested in learning more about ADHD. We've got a link in there. Basically, it's all in the show notes. The executive producer of No Filter, my good friend and my co-pilot on this podcast from the beginning, and the person who encouraged me to get my diagnosis, is Eliza Ratliff. Your host today was Claire Murphy, and I'm Mia Freedman. Thanks for having me in your ears.
That was actually quite an emotional conversation at the time. And we ended up talking for quite a bit after we stopped recording too, because as someone who's worked for Mia for a long time, I have seen how her ADHD has impacted myself and my work colleagues, being her employees. So it's interesting to finally kind of understand a bit better and figure out where she's coming from. We hope you enjoyed it. If you're after more women's health news, well, is your full body health check. It drops every week on a Thursday. Coming up in our next topic, we're going to be focusing in on the body. We'll delve into weight loss drugs, and body longevity. There is a link to follow us right here in the show notes.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.